Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a pretty fascinating journey. We're going to start way down inside the human mind, and we'll end up deep inside the black box of global algorithms. We're essentially going to unpack the hidden social foundations that dictate how our world actually works. Because whether you're wondering why your own community behaves the way it does, or why the latest tech rollout just made the exact same mistakes as the last one, well, the answer usually lies in understanding the complex, messy fabric of human society.
So, to start us off, let's tackle a core mystery. Why do well-intentioned public policies so often fail? We see it all the time, right? A government rolls out this massive, expensive initiative to improve people's lives, and instead, it totally backfires, or it just quietly fizzles out. The reason for this is usually pretty simple, but profound. Top-down interventions frequently fail because they're trying to engineer a society that they just don't fully understand. They completely ignore the microscopic, everyday social interactions happening on the ground.
Now, public policy isn't just a bunch of laws on a piece of paper. It's a formal, state-directed process that's specifically designed to interface directly with society. The goal is usually to regulate, control, or better our social world. But here's the catch. To do that effectively, to actually know if a policy is going to soar or crash, we first need a really deep sociological understanding of the exact people it's trying to govern. We literally have to understand their hopes, their desires, and the unwritten rules of how they interact with each other.
Which brings us to Section 1, the individual as performer. This is our core building block.
Okay, so sociology actually splits human identity right down the middle. We have the I and the me. The I is you as the active subject. It's that spontaneous, in-the-moment part of you that's eating, reading, walking around. But the me, that is the self as an object. It's the assumed, organized attitudes of everyone else towards you. It's how you think your family, your friends, and society at large are viewing you at any given moment. So your actual identity? It's basically an endless, internal negotiation between these two forces.
The sociologist Erving Goffman used this brilliant theater analogy to describe this everyday tension. He said that on the front stage, you're performing. You are actively managing impressions, projecting this idealized, attractive persona that's tailored exactly to what society expects of you. But on the backstage, that's where the mask finally comes off. That is your authentic, unfiltered, private self. And honestly, constantly moving back and forth between these two stages, it can be exhausting. It creates a massive amount of tension in our day-to-day lives.
As Goffman famously observed, the self isn't just some static object sitting permanently inside your head. Instead, it is the dramatic product of the interaction between you and your audiences. Think about it. How much does your behavior change depending on who is in the room watching you? This constant shifting, this endless adapting to our audience is exactly why creating rigid public policies to regulate human behavior is so incredibly tricky.
Moving on to Section 2, building the social web. Let's look at networks and connections.
Let's walk through how this social domino effect actually works. The absolute most basic building block is a dyad. That's just two people interacting. But the very second you add a third person to make it a triad, the math completely changes. Suddenly, you have the potential for coalitions. Two people can team up against one, or one person can play the mediator. Just by adding that third person, massive political dynamics and potential conflicts are born. Multiply that out a few thousand times, and you get intricate networks that stretch across entire communities and cities.
And here's a really surprising fact about those networks. There is unexpected power in our weak ties. We naturally tend to value our strong ties, like our close family and our best friends, but sociology shows us that it's actually our weak ties, our distant acquaintances, that are the most valuable for expanding our horizons. Why is that? Well, because your close friends mostly know the same people and the same things that you do. Your weak ties, however, act as bridges to completely different networks. They grant you access to totally new resources, new information, and as a lot of us know, they're often the source of that unexpected job offer.
Section 3, Groups and Stereotypes. Let's talk about boundaries and biases.
Within all these groups we've been talking about, people hold social status. And this status basically falls into two distinct buckets. First, you have achieved status. This is something you earn through your own effort, like grinding to get a degree or climbing the career ladder. But then you have ascribed status. This is something you are simply born into, like race, gender, or the economic class of your family. And the tough reality we face is that ascribed statuses, things that are completely out of an individual's control, often unfairly dictate their entire life trajectory and how society treats them.
Which brings us to a major pitfall in group dynamics: essentialism. Essentialism is the false, overly simplified belief that just because someone belongs to a specific group, they must possess the exact same innate qualities as everyone else in that group. It completely strips away all individual complexity. It's when we start viewing real, complex people as just a bundle of assumed characteristics simply because they belong to an outgroup.
So when this essentialist thinking takes hold, stereotypes take root. Stereotypes totally ignore the beautiful, complex diversity of the actual individual and replace it with a lazy mental shortcut. This very quickly fuels segregationist mentalities, that toxic idea of us versus them, and worse, these ideas embed deep prejudices directly into our cultural institutions, creating systemic power asymmetries that directly harm marginalized groups.
Next up, Section 4, Modernization and State Planning. Let's look at top-down interventions.
To really explore this macro level, let's look at a fascinating case study from India, analyzed by the sociologist M.N. Srinivas. He observed two distinct types of societal change happening. First, there's Sanskritization. This is an organic, internal process where lower castes emulate the customs of upper castes to try and achieve upward mobility within the existing hierarchy. Conversely, he noted Westernization. This represents the complex, layered changes introduced entirely externally via colonial technology, institutions, and values. Both of these represent a society naturally reacting and adapting to major changes on its own terms.
Now, consider India's early 5-year plans right after independence. The state attempted to systematically modernize a massive, ancient society from the top down. In 1951, they tackled agriculture and savings. By 1956, they pushed hard for rapid industrialization, and by 1961, the focus shifted over to food and education. The state essentially entered the social and economic lives of millions of citizens, trying to engineer progress from above.
But, as we've learned, society always talks back. This massive public policy had a huge unintended sociological consequence. When a government starts allocating massive resources from the top down, society reacts. The central planning process essentially sent a signal to traditional groups. If you want a piece of the pie, you need to organize. This sparked a massive surge in identity politics and subnationalism. Groups mobilized around their specific identities, specifically to bargain with the state for resources. So the top-down policy actually rewired the ground-level group dynamics.
And finally, Section 5, Artificial Intelligence and Bias. We've arrived at the new digital frontier. Welcome to the world of algorithmic bias. You know, it's really easy to think of computers as perfectly rational and totally fair. But artificial intelligence isn't magic. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a mirror. Algorithmic bias occurs when machine learning systems take the existing stereotypes and prejudices of our society and mathematically reinforce them through automated decisions. Technology is absolutely not inherently neutral because it learns directly from our deeply flawed social fabric. Here is the crucial reality we have to face. Machine learning requires vast amounts of data. But where does that data come from? It comes from us, from our history. And our history, as we know, is full of essentialism, segregation, and bias. If machines are trained on old data, they will dutifully, automatically reproduce those historical biases against marginalized groups. But unlike a human being, a computer has no subjective empathy to realize it's doing something wrong. It just follows the mathematical pattern. This is exactly why AI struggles so profoundly with fairness. It's trained on biased historical data, and crucially, it operates as a black box. It might deny someone a mortgage or misidentify a specific demographic, but we often can't even see the inner mathematical logic it used to make that choice. It completely lacks human subjective context. And, importantly, it often reflects the blind spots of the specific demographics who build it. It is, essentially, an automated, hyperfast version of the stereotyping we discussed earlier.
Which brings us to the ultimate question we're left with in this explainer. Can we actually build fair machines if we haven't even built a fair society? As we've seen today, from the individual managing impressions, to groups forming essentialist boundaries, to state policies triggering identity politics, absolutely everything is connected. The algorithms of tomorrow are actively learning from the society of today. But by understanding these social foundations, we take the absolute vital first step towards shaping a fairer future for all of us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.